Would you believe me if I told you that we might fight this ominous machine soon? Probably. Should you be excited? Yes. Am I excited? Not really. I don't want to set high expectations. The word of the video is basic. Can you guess why? It's easy for most players to be angry and disappointed with the game since the release of Phoenix Rising, PS4 being the clear example. Of course, game development takes lots of effort and time, and so far the dev team have been fully transparent about the situations. The delay might have been good for the game in some ways. While programmers are busy writing code for fixes, then the other teams can work and plan on future content. So, since the Reaper, that's been dubbed by the players, this machine is probably coming soon as a potential raid boss. With hints from the game and this Twitter post. It says bring your friends, so most likely it will be a tough enemy. Hints from the game? Plenty of people have already covered it, but I'll refer to Pufty if you want more information. If it's just a raid, or just a machine that we can find and kill whenever, it still marks something big for Generation Zero, and that is why it needs to be good. It needs to be better than Phoenix Rising and preferably better than Alpine Unrest. Of course, those are story mission expansions, but if we say the Reaper is a full raid, then we can look at the story missions design, which so far have been objective given. The game tells you where to go, shoot some robots, and then you're done. The base game story is find out what happened, and that's it. Sure, on paper that's what every mission ever sounds like in a video game. What's lacking is player engagement and motivation. During a mission, more often than not, you just do what you're told. Some are that you have to investigate what happened to someone. Are they alive? Are they an ally? Nope, they are dead. A cliffhanger. You're just told to care, but then you can't care. Outside of the last mission, there are no scripted sequences here, which I would say is the only memorable mission of the game's vanilla story. Most gameplay content, such as bikes, rivals, experimentals, and crafting are good ideas, but some of those are either decent or basic implemented. Rivals as a concept sounds awesome. Machines that have adapted to your level of skill and stay a big threat are just actually regular enemies. With experimental weapons that you might get after level 25, before that, don't bother. Even when you grind for rivals, you won't get anything decent unless RNGesus doesn't grant you the experimental gun. Experimentals do have a cool visual design that makes people ask, where the hell do you get that? A reasonable explanation for them being grindy is that they are overpowered as hell. Well, some are. That still doesn't excuse the severe low drop rate and the reskin of enemies. Well, it's not even reskin, it's just them having a different name. Crafting. Some recipes you find on your own, and some are machine loot. Should you get them? Well, they don't really offer much than just a stat boost. Problem is that you need to craft the previous level of an item to be able to craft a high level one. This requires me to scour the lands for the previous ones in order. I guess I have to use the Wikipedia for that. With a menu not even highlighting the current equipped items, it's a chore to add stats to your character. And it's not like those stats are even good at all. The game doesn't offer much on replayability. Want a different build? You need experience for that. Do you get it? Well, you replay the game? What? You can't do that. Well, that's unless you want to mess around with your save files. If you're on PC, that is. You really need to go out of your way to replay the story, as that progression is tied to all of your characters. If you want to level up a new one, then you gotta grind the machines, which in the end is much slower than playing through the missions again with a new save file. So I ask, why does the game give us the option to play with other kinds of builds without us being able to respec nor replay the game for the big EXP? But what about the paid content? Alpine Unrest was good because it added something to care for, and an island that had an eerie feeling not commonly found in a vanilla map. The story, while having some utterly cringe and cheesy moments, was a good continuation. It added NPCs who are actually the protagonists of the story, despite you being the reason Phoenix had something to actively fight against on the islands. Basically, your story role is shoot and don't you dare ask any questions, you're a puppet. Well, you do technically talk off screen, but that's a bad excuse for character development. Hell, even in Phoenix Rising they make fun of this. Say the DLC somehow doesn't improve much and has less value than Alpine Unrest. It added 10 new main missions and 10 side missions, just like the previous DLC. However, the revamped portions of the farmlands and the whole of the south coast, well, that's free for all players. Of course, that makes sense. Why pay for a slight new version of the same map you've already paid for? And it would also conflict with DLC owners' worlds in co-op. It would just be a mess. But even the story is far worse because it goes by so fast. It introduces characters that get emotional moments that aren't earned. It's so hard to care. We get more Phoenix moments, but other than that, Phoenix Rising is a step down. If it was priced less, then maybe it would be worth it. Overall, the Phoenix Rising update, not the actual game, does add what's comparable to the value of Alpine Unrest. Free stuff is great, but then why does Phoenix Rising cost the same as Alpine, if half of what is added to the update as a whole is free? So what does this have to do with the Reaper, you ask? Well, so far I've done a basic short recap of how new content has been integrated and handled since release. If you watch a live stream from the Generation Zero team and ask about future content, then mostly the answer will be something in the line to, we can fix it later. Of course, that's not what they directly say, but in the end that is what the default answer sounds like. Not many games can save themselves from that. Well, unless you pull a No Man's Sky. But to be fair, Generation Zero didn't overhype things that wasn't there. It makes us question how far planned the game is, how much of the dev time was spent before release. The game is trying to be a live service. That's been confirmed to be the case, but what do I say trying? Because that is false. When you think of live service games, what comes to mind? Destiny 2, The Division 2, Fortnite, Rainbow Six Siege, The Avengers. Those are games to name a few. If you compare those games to Generation Zero, then you understand that Generation Zero doesn't follow any model that defines it as a live service. It's just a game with updates every now and then. Most updates have been fixes to glitches and bugs. The game so far feels like early access. I hope that isn't the case. By far my biggest concern is that I'm afraid that Generation Zero will lose its groundedness. Sure, it's death murder robots, but so far every high-tech element has been given a reasonable answer to why it exists. So, why are there machines that even in our time doesn't exist? Well, the Swedish government spent a fuck ton of money in the military's R&D being able to use a sledgehammer and brännboll bat to take down a fucking tank class. Is this One Punch Man, or are these death murder robots machines made of cardboard and our guns are using airsoft rounds? Since the content has been drip-fed, I come back to how much of this content is planned. Will the developers in desperation lose the grounded nature of the game and go all out and become Swedish Borderlands? Or will they try to balance both wacky and grounded gameplay? That's really hard to pull off. Remember that the game is not widely known. Melee felt like it was something that was added because players wanted it. Sure, it was a popular request in the streams, but does it work in the game's universe? Developers getting desperate for something meta-changing? Feels like it. Also, did I mention that the NPCs are in the game? Well, aside from being the radio people and the protagonist at the same time, they do very little. They stand and sometimes they move. Are they vendors? Can they give you information outside of the narrative? Do they have a function that adds to gameplay? No. Well, aside for that last mission, Phoenix Rising, but that's just basic escort missions. So, what do I think we will get from the Reaper? A heavily modified version of a regular tank with a new coat of paint. Well, it does have some new armor additions. It feels safe to say that it's stronger than the Apocalypse version, and probably more if you need friends to kill it. Weapons? Well, I can't see any. Low reasons might be that Phoenix is still working on it. For real life, it would be reasonable not to show it. It's been a year since Alpine Unrest. That's of course if the actual weapons is just a really big area on effect attack and stomps. Reminds me of a certain other game. I have low expectations because I honestly don't think the Reaper will be anything special. The rival system was claimed to be special and unique, but in the end they are just normal enemies with a new name. I have honestly such a hard time to think of unique things that the Reaper can do that isn't just a light variation of the normal tanks. I really hope I'm wrong about that, because here is also a big question: will this cost? Let's say they give us a full-blown raid with some new loot for maybe €10, $10. That's a bit more than the other expansions, but since raids require so much stuff that needs player engagement, i.e. puzzles, then paying 10 sounds reasonable. Considering how the current updates and expansions have been in quality, it's almost hard to imagine a small dev team making a big-sized content that is free, because I'd say it would be a loss, considering that since the latest expansion in July, no updates have been dropped, aside for hotfixes for the Xbox platform. But then also remember that some of those reasons have because of network problems with the PlayStation. But remember, Pontus, the community manager, has told us several times that the team of Generation Zero is about 30 people. Not every one of those are programmers, art, some are quality assurance, audio and other roles. And remember, the game development takes time and effort, and I don't think working from home makes things any better for them. However, you could argue that the reason why everything so far has been mostly bug fixing and tiny bits of content is actually a test for the devs to understand what the players want, and thus hold back so that the big thing blows our expectations out of the water. Do you understand my concerns? On a closing note, I would like to mention that while it seems that I'm shitting way too much on the game, I'm only being so critical because Generation Zero is a niche game with a unique setting, and I don't want it to take an easy way out of losing the grand reality it's trying to present. I want the game to be good, I want the game to succeed, unlike people who just say the game is bad for the sake of saying it, without presenting decent arguments, because that doesn't help the Generation Zero team. However, in general, the community is quite wholesome, with some big bad apples every now and then. I say be supportive of the dev team and don't be an asshole. You can criticize the game because it needs it, but be reasonable with how you present it or act with it. Now, I would also like to credit Pufty for helping me out with checking my script so that it doesn't sound like total trash. I will link his channel in the description.